I have watched my people rise from savagery to starlight in the span of 6,000 years. To the elder races of this galaxy, to the Eldari who measure their history in millions of years, to the humans whose imperium has endured for 10 millennia, to the orcs whose existence predates the rise of most sentient species. We are children, infants, a civilization so young that our entire history could fit within a single chapter of theirs, a people so new to the stars that we have not yet learned all the ways the galaxy can break those who dare to reach for it. But we have learned much, and what we have learned, we remember. My name is Aun O Shiores. I am an ethereal of the Tau Empire, a member of the caste that guides and unifies all others, a keeper of the philosophy that has transformed my people from warring tribes into a force that reshapes the galaxy according to principles the elder races have forgotten or never knew. I have lived for 312 years, a long life by the standards of my kind, though a mere moment by the standards of beings who measure their existence in millennia. I have seen the third sphere expansion reach its zenith and its crisis. I have witnessed the fourth sphere's departure and the horrors that followed. I have watched the fifth sphere begin the long work of reclaiming what was lost. And I have studied the histories that came before me, the records that preserve the memory of ages I did not witness, the testimonies of ethereals who guided our people through trials that would have destroyed lesser civilizations. I carry their knowledge within me, their wisdom, their understanding of what the Tau were and what we have become and what we might yet be if we remain true to the path they set us upon. I have been asked to speak of this history, not for my own people. We know our story, carry it in our hearts, teach it to each generation so that none will forget the darkness from which we emerged or the light toward which we strive. I have been asked to speak for those beyond our borders, for the humans and others who know us only as enemies or enigmas, who see our expansion as threat rather than opportunity, who do not understand that what we offer is not conquest but salvation. This is the history of the Tau Empire. This is the story of a people who found a better way, who built a civilization on cooperation rather than competition, who proved that the galaxy's cruelty is not inevitable, that there are alternatives to the endless war and suffering that define existence for so many species. We call our guiding philosophy the Tauva, the greater good. These words have been translated into 1,000 human languages, have been spoken in imperial propaganda as condemnation, and in our own broadcasts as invitation. But translation cannot capture what the greater good truly means, cannot convey the depth of commitment it represents, cannot explain why millions of Tau and millions of aliens who have joined us willingly sacrifice their individual desires for the collective advancement of all. The greater good is not ideology. It is not religion. It is not the desperate faith that humans cling to, nor the cold logic that machines employ, nor the savage instinct that drives the orcs, nor the cruel pleasure that motivates the dark kin of the Eldari. It is something else entirely, a recognition arrived at through reason and confirmed through experience, that individual beings achieve more together than apart, that cooperation produces outcomes superior to competition, that the good of the many genuinely does outweigh the good of the few, not as abstract principle, but as practical reality. We did not always know this truth. Before the ethereals came, before the castes were unified, before the greater good was articulated and embraced, we were as savage as any species the galaxy has produced. We slaughtered each other with enthusiasm that would have impressed the orcs. We built nothing that lasted, achieved nothing that mattered, spent our potential on internecine conflict that would have eventually driven us to extinction. The Monto, the time of dying, the age of terror, lasted for generations. It was the crucible in which our species was tested and nearly found wanting. The darkness that preceded the dawn, the suffering that made the greater good not merely attractive, but necessary. We emerged from it transformed, unified, committed to a path that has carried us from a single world to an empire that spans the stars. This is the story I will tell. Not the sanitized version that our watercast diplomats offer to potential allies. Not the simplified narrative that our firecast warriors carry into battle. But the full truth. The failures as well as the successes. The costs as well as the benefits. The questions that remain unanswered as well as the certainties we have achieved. I tell it because understanding requires honesty, because the greater good is served by truth rather than propaganda, because those who would join us deserve to know what they are joining, and those who would oppose us deserve to understand what they oppose. We are the Tau. We are young and we are growing, and we carry within us a vision of what the galaxy might become if reason prevailed over madness, if cooperation replaced conflict, if beings of all species recognized that their fates are intertwined and acted accordingly. The elder races dismiss us as naive. The Imperium of Man condemns us as dangerous. The Orcs see us as prey. The forces of chaos see us as souls yet unclaimed. Perhaps they are all correct. Perhaps our youth is naivety, our expansion is danger, our confidence is merely the ignorance of those who have not yet learned how cruel the universe can be. But perhaps we are something else. Perhaps we are proof that another way is possible, that the patterns of violence and despair that have defined galactic history are not immutable laws, but merely habits. Habits that can be broken by those with the wisdom to see alternatives and the courage to pursue them. This is our hope. This is our purpose. This is the greater good that we carry into a galaxy that desperately needs it. Let me tell you how it began. Let me show you the darkness from which we emerged, so that you might understand the light we have found. Let me speak of the Monto, and the coming of the ethereals, and the birth of an empire that may yet change everything. 6,000 years ago, the Tau were not a civilization. We were barely a species. Our homeworld of To sits in the eastern fringe of the galaxy, in a region so distant from the great powers that they did not know we existed, did not care that we struggled and suffered and died in our millions, on a world that had given us life but seemed determined to take it back. We had evolved intelligence, had developed tools, had built settlements and cultivated the land, and begun the long climb from animal to something more. But we had not found unity. We had found only new ways to kill each other. The Monto, the terror, the dying time, was the age when our species tore itself apart. The ancestors of what would become the castes had already diverged, already developed the specializations that would later become our greatest strength. The ancestors of the fire caste were warriors, bred across generations for combat, for strength, for the will to fight and kill without hesitation. The ancestors of the earth caste were builders, artisans, makers of tools and structures. The ancestors of the air caste had adapted to life in the high mountains, had developed lighter frames and keener eyes for navigating the thin atmosphere of the peaks. The ancestors of the water caste had become traders, negotiators, those who moved between communities and facilitated exchange. But there were no ethereals. Not yet. And without the ethereals, without the unifying force that would eventually bind us together, these proto-castes saw each other not as complementary parts of a greater whole, but as competitors, as threats, as enemies to be conquered or destroyed. The wars lasted for generations. I have studied the records, fragmentary, incomplete, preserved through oral tradition before we developed writing systems sophisticated enough to capture history. The fire-caste warriors swept across the plains, burning settlements, slaughtering populations, claiming territory that they could not hold and did not know how to govern. The Earth Caste built fortifications, developed weapons, turned their creative genius toward the production of ever more efficient instruments of death. The Air Caste raided from the mountains, striking at supply lines, isolating communities, starving those they could not kill directly. The Water Caste played factions against each other, profited from conflict, sold weapons and information to all sides while belonging to none. We were destroying ourselves. This is not metaphor, not exaggeration, not the dramatization of historians seeking to make the past more compelling than it was. Our population was declining. Our settlements were shrinking. Our accumulated knowledge was being lost as the keepers of that knowledge died in battles that achieved nothing except the perpetuation of more battles. We were perhaps 3 or 4 generations from extinction when the ethereals appeared. I say appeared because that is what the records indicate, and I will not pretend to know more than I know. The ethereals emerged during a siege, the fortress of Phaeton, where fire-caste warriors had surrounded an earth-caste stronghold and were preparing for a final assault that would leave no survivors. Both sides were committed. Both sides were certain of the righteousness of their cause. Both sides were about to participate in a slaughter that would weaken our species further, hasten the extinction that awaited us if we could not find another way. And then they came. 2 figures appearing between the armies, walking calmly across the killing ground, as though the weapons pointed at them from both sides were of no consequence. They were Tau, but unlike any Tau that either army had seen. Their skin bore a subtle luminescence. Their eyes held a depth that commanded attention. Their presence radiated a calm authority that made warriors who had been screaming for blood fall silent, made generals who had been ordering charges hold their commands, made an entire battlefield pause in confused wonder. They spoke. The records do not preserve their exact words. Those who witnessed the moment were too overwhelmed to transcribe accurately, and the accounts that survive are colored by reverence accumulated across millennia. But the essence is clear. They spoke of waste, of futility, of a species blessed with intelligence using that intelligence only to devise more efficient methods of self-destruction. They spoke of potential, of what the Tau might become if they could find a way past the conflicts that consumed them. They spoke of unity, of cooperation, of a future in which the strengths of each group complemented the others, rather than competing with them. And they spoke of the Tauva, the greater good, the principle that would transform everything. I do not know what power the ethereals wielded in that moment. There are theories, pheromones that affect Tau neurology, psychic abilities that our species does not consciously recognize, simple charisma amplified by the desperation of beings who sensed that they stood at the edge of annihilation. The truth is likely some combination of these factors, or perhaps something else entirely, something that our science has not yet learned to measure, or our philosophy has not yet learned to name. What I know is that it worked. The siege ended without battle. The warriors lowered their weapons. The generals met to speak rather than to fight. And in the days and weeks that followed, the ethereals moved across Tau, appearing at flashpoints, mediating conflicts, spreading a message of unity that found purchase in hearts exhausted by generations of meaningless war. The unification took time. The records suggest perhaps a century, perhaps longer. The early chronology is imprecise, reconstructed from sources that do not always agree. But it happened. The castes formed, codified, embraced their roles not as limitations but as contributions to something greater than any individual or group could achieve alone. The fire caste became the warriors who protected all, not just their own tribe. The earth caste became the builders who constructed for all, their creativity directed toward advancement rather than destruction. The air caste became the messengers and pilots who connected all, their mobility serving unity rather than disruption. The water caste became the diplomats and administrators who coordinated all, their skills in negotiation finally applied to cooperation rather than manipulation. And the ethereals became the guides, the unifiers, the keepers of the greater good who ensured that the castes remained bound together, that the old conflicts did not resurface, that the unity so painfully achieved would endure across generations. This is the first miracle of Tao history, not a supernatural event. We do not believe in the supernatural, do not worship gods, do not attribute our achievements to forces beyond comprehension, but a miracle nonetheless, in the sense that it should not have happened, that nothing in our prior history suggested we were capable of such transformation, that we came within generations of extinction and instead found a path to the stars. The period that followed the unification is called the first sphere of expansion, though in truth it was not expansion at all. It was consolidation, the long process of building a civilization from the ruins of what the Monto had destroyed. We developed writing, mathematics, science, the systematic accumulation and transmission of knowledge that distinguishes civilization from mere survival. We built cities that were not fortresses, roads that connected rather than divided, institutions that served all castes rather than privileging one above others. We developed technology. This is the contribution of the Earth caste that perhaps more than anything else has shaped what the Tao have become. Without the psychic abilities that allow humans to navigate the warp, without the ancient technological inheritance that other species possess, we built our advancement from first principles, from observation and experimentation and the patient accumulation of understanding. We developed energy weapons while humans were still relying on chemical propellants. We developed anti-gravity technology while other species were bound to ground and sea. We developed artificial intelligence and automation while the imperium of man was destroying such things in fear of their potential. We did not know in those early centuries that other species existed. Our astronomers observed the stars, theorized about what might orbit them, wondered whether life had arisen elsewhere in the cosmos. But we had no way to reach those distant lights, no technology capable of bridging the immense gulfs between solar systems. Tao was our world, our universe, the totality of existence as far as we could directly experience it. This changed with the development of the ZFR Horizon Accelerator engine, what humans call our ether drive, the technology that allows our vessels to travel faster than light without entering the warp that other species use for interstellar transit. The drive is slow by the standards of warp travel, covers in weeks or months what imperial vessels can traverse in days. But it is ours, developed through our own genius, reliable and safe and free from the horrors that lurk in the dimension humans must brave whenever they travel between stars. The first sphere expansion began in earnest approximately 4,000 years ago. We spread from Tao to the nearby systems, colonizing worlds that could support our biology, establishing outposts on worlds that could not, building the infrastructure of an interstellar civilization with the same methodical patience that had rebuilt our homeworld after the Monto. And we encountered others. The galaxy, we discovered, was not empty. It was full of species, full of civilizations, full of beings whose existence we had never suspected during our millennia of isolation. Some were hostile, seeing our expansion as threat, attacking our colony ships, destroying our outposts, teaching us that the universe beyond Toe was far more dangerous than anything we had known during even the darkest days of the Monto. But some were not hostile. Some were willing to listen, to speak, to consider the message that our watercast diplomats carried into every first contact, that there was a better way, that cooperation served all parties better than conflict, that the greater good was not merely a Tao philosophy, but a universal truth applicable to all beings capable of reason. These species joined us, not through conquest, not through coercion, but through choice, through recognition that what we offered was genuinely better than what they had known, that life within the Tao Empire provided opportunities and securities that life outside it did not. The Kroot were first, those avian carnivores whose mercenary culture had prepared them to evaluate offers pragmatically, whose experience with other employers had taught them to recognize fair dealing when they encountered it. Then the Vespid, then the Nikasa, then dozens of others whose names are less known, but whose contributions to our empire are no less real. We became something unprecedented in the galaxy's history, a multi-species civilization bound together not by force, but by principle, not by conquest, but by consent, not by the domination of one species over others, but by the genuine recognition that all species within our borders were part of a greater whole, each contributing according to their nature, each receiving according to their need. This is the second miracle of Tao history. The first was that we did not destroy ourselves. The second was that we found a way to incorporate others without becoming the empires we had learned to despise, without replicating the cruelties we witnessed in the Imperium of Man and the other elder powers, without sacrificing the principles that had saved us from extinction in pursuit of the expansion that those principles demanded. We are not perfect. I will not pretend that every species joined willingly, that every integration was bloodless, that every member of our empire is equally content with their place within it. The greater good requires sacrifice, and sacrifice is not always freely given. Some species resisted, and resistance was overcome. Some individuals dissented, and dissent was corrected. The needs of the many do, genuinely, outweigh the needs of the few, and this truth sometimes requires actions that the few would not have chosen. But we are better than the alternatives. This I believe with certainty, born of study and experience. The Imperium of Man exterminates species that will not submit to its dominion, sacrifices billions of its own citizens to maintain an order that serves only a fraction of those who live within it, permits suffering on scales that our philosophy cannot justify under any circumstances. The forces of chaos offer freedom, but deliver only madness, only the dissolution of self, only slavery to appetites that can never be satisfied. The orcs offer nothing but violence, the dark kin nothing but cruelty, the necrons nothing but extinction. We offer the greater good. We offer a place in something that genuinely strives to serve all its members. We offer the only hope this galaxy has for a future that is not merely more of the same suffering that has defined its past. This is what we built in the early millennia, what we carried forward into the second sphere expansion, what we have continued to refine and extend across the centuries that have followed. Let me tell you of those centuries. Let me speak of expansion and conflict, of triumph and tragedy, of the costs we have paid and the costs we have extracted. Let me tell you what the greater good requires of those who serve it. The second sphere, expansion, began approximately 1,000 years ago, and with it came the first true test of everything we had built. The first sphere had been consolidation, the careful, methodical extension of our civilization to nearby systems, the integration of species who came to us willingly, the construction of infrastructure that would support further growth. We had encountered resistance, had fought battles, had learned that the galaxy contained threats that required military response. But we had not yet faced an enemy capable of truly challenging what we had become. The Imperium of Man changed everything. I do not know precisely when Imperial forces first became aware of our existence. The records suggest that human explorers had encountered our outer colonies centuries before formal contact was established, had reported back to their masters about a Xenos civilization expanding in the eastern fringe. But the Imperium is vast, its bureaucracy labyrinthine, its attention divided among a million competing priorities. We were a minor concern, a distant nuisance, a problem to be addressed eventually, but not urgently. This changed when our expansion brought us into direct competition for worlds that the Imperium considered part of its domain. Human colonies that had been isolated for millennia, cut off from the greater Imperium by the vagaries of warp travel, suddenly found themselves presented with a choice: continue their existence as forgotten fragments of a civilization that had abandoned them, or join a new civilization that offered them protection, prosperity, and a place in something that genuinely valued their contribution. Many chose to join us. This is the truth that imperial propaganda cannot acknowledge, the reality that the ecclesiarchy's preachers must deny. Human beings, given the choice between the Imperium's distant tyranny and the Tao Empire's present opportunity, frequently chose us. Not all. Many remained loyal to an emperor they had never seen, to an Imperium that had forgotten their existence, to traditions that provided identity even when they provided nothing else. But enough. Enough that our expansion accelerated. Enough that worlds fell to us without a shot being fired. Enough that the Imperium finally recognized us as a threat that required response. The Damocles Gulf Crusade was that response. I have studied the records of this conflict extensively, have read both our own accounts and those we have captured from Imperial sources. The Imperium committed significant forces, Space Marines of multiple chapters, Imperial Guard regiments numbering in the hundreds of thousands, naval assets sufficient to challenge any power in the eastern fringe. They came to crush us, to reclaim the worlds we had taken, to demonstrate that no Xenos civilization could challenge humanity's dominion over the stars. They failed. I do not say this with pride, though our Firecast warriors earned the right to pride 1,000 times over in those campaigns. I say it with the simple recognition of historical fact. The Imperium came to destroy us, and they did not destroy us. They came to reclaim their worlds, and they did not reclaim them. They came to teach us the cost of challenging humanity's supremacy, and instead they learned that supremacy cannot be assumed, that young civilizations can defeat old ones, that the greater good provides advantages that brute force cannot overcome. The battles were costly. Dalith, our greatest sept in the region, was besieged by forces that outnumbered our defenders significantly. The fighting lasted for months, consumed resources we could not easily replace, killed warriors whose experience and training represented irreplaceable investments. We lost worlds, temporarily in most cases, but the losing was real, the suffering genuine, the cost measured in Tau lives and the lives of those who had joined us. But we held, and then we pushed back, and then something happened that historians still debate, that our Watercast analysts have never fully explained, that may have been coincidence or may have been the galaxy itself intervening in our favor. The Imperium withdrew, their forces, on the verge of breaking through our defenses, received orders to retreat. The crusade was abandoned, the fleets recalled, the armies transported to face threats that their commanders deemed more pressing than a young Xenos empire in the eastern fringe. We learned later that a Tyranid hive fleet had been detected approaching Imperial space, that the resources committed to our destruction were needed elsewhere, that we had been saved not by our own strength alone, but by the arrival of an enemy so terrible that even the Imperium had to prioritize. This is the truth of our survival. We earned our victory through courage and sacrifice, through tactical genius and technological superiority, through the unity that the greater good provides and that Imperial forces, for all their numbers, could not match. But we were also fortunate. The galaxy's cruelty, which so often works against those who seek to build rather than destroy, worked in our favor for once, sent a threat so overwhelming that our enemies had no choice but to turn away from us and face it. We learned from the Damocles Gulf Crusade. We learned that the Imperium was not invincible, that human armies could be defeated, that the mythology of imperial supremacy was precisely that. Mythology, stories told to maintain control, lies that crumbled when tested against reality. But we also learned that we were not invincible either, that our technology and our unity had limits, that the galaxy contained forces capable of challenging everything we had built. The Third Sphere expansion was our response to these lessons. Launched approximately 300 years ago, it represented our most ambitious effort yet. A coordinated push across multiple fronts. A commitment of resources that strained even our considerable industrial capacity. A gamble that we could expand faster than our enemies could respond. For a time, it succeeded brilliantly. World after world fell to us, some through conquest, more through conversion, the majority through the simple recognition that what we offered was better than what they had. Our empire doubled in size, then doubled again. Species that had never encountered us before joined our ranks, bringing new capabilities, new perspectives, new contributions to the greater good. We built shipyards and academies, founded new septs, extended the reach of our civilization until it stretched across a volume of space that our ancestors could never have imagined. And then we encountered the limits of our understanding. The Imperium uses the warp for interstellar travel. I have explained this already. Their ships enter a dimension of pure psychic energy, traverse distances in that dimension that would take centuries to cross in real space, emerge at their destinations having experienced journeys measured in days or weeks, rather than years or decades. It is dangerous, unpredictable, requires navigators who are themselves mutants and psychers, and it exposes travelers to entities that hunger for human souls. We cannot use the warp. Our species has almost no psychic presence, almost no connection to that dimension that underlies reality. This has been our protection. The entities that prey upon human psychers do not notice us, cannot feed upon us, have no interest in beings whose souls are so faint as to be nearly invisible. But it has also been our limitation. Our ether drives are reliable but slow. Our expansion has been constrained by the simple physics of how long it takes to travel from one system to another. The Third Sphere expansion pushed against this limitation. Our Earth-caste scientists, seeking to accelerate our growth, developed new technologies, experimental drives that might allow faster travel, methods of manipulating real space that might achieve what warp travel achieved without the warp's dangers. They succeeded beyond their expectations. They opened a door that should never have been opened. I must speak carefully here. What I am about to describe is not widely known, is not discussed openly, is considered by many in the ethereal caste to be information too dangerous for general distribution. But I have committed to honesty in this account, and honesty requires that I address the events that followed, the catastrophe that transformed the third sphere expansion from triumph into tragedy. The new drives worked. Ships equipped with them could cross distances in hours that would have taken months with conventional technology. We deployed them with enthusiasm, sent fleets equipped with the new systems to establish colonies at the furthest reaches of our planned expansion, celebrated what we believed to be a technological breakthrough that would change everything. The ships disappeared, every vessel equipped with the experimental drives, every crew member aboard them, every colonist being transported to new worlds. They vanished, translated into a dimension that was neither real space nor warp, lost in spaces between spaces that our science had not known existed. For years, we mourned them. We searched, sent rescue missions, devoted resources to finding some trace of where they had gone. We found nothing. The third sphere's leading edge had been cut away, its most ambitious elements simply erased from existence. The cost of our hubris measured in hundreds of thousands of lives. And then, decades later, they returned. Not all of them, not most of them. A fraction, a remnant, survivors of an experience that had broken most of those who endured it. They emerged from the spaces where they had been lost, and they were changed. And what they brought back with them was not the triumph we had hoped for, but a warning about the true nature of the galaxy and our place within it. They spoke of something they had encountered in that other dimension, a presence, an awareness, an entity or entities that had noticed them, that had reached for them, that had done things to them that they could not fully describe. They spoke of voices offering salvation, of light that seemed benevolent until you looked at it too closely, of bargains made in desperation by beings who did not understand what they were bargaining with. They spoke of chaos, not by that name. We did not yet have a name for what they had encountered, did not yet understand that the Imperium's endless war against heresy and corruption was not merely superstition, but response to genuine threat. But the descriptions were unmistakable to those who had studied human culture, who had read the warnings in imperial texts we had captured, who had dismissed those warnings as propaganda designed to maintain control over a fearful population. The warnings were real. The threats were real. The dimension that humans called the warp was not merely dangerous, but malevolent, inhabited by intelligences that hungered for the souls of mortal beings, that would offer gifts and demand prices, that had been fighting a war against material reality since before most species achieved sentience. And we had attracted their attention, the survivors of the fourth sphere, for that is what we called those lost fleets, the fourth sphere expansion that had been launched unintentionally, that had spent years in dimensions we could not comprehend. They had been touched by these entities. Some had been corrupted, had been turned into vectors for influences that our science could not measure, but our society could not tolerate. They were dealt with. I will not describe how. The greater good requires sacrifices, and some sacrifices cannot be spoken of without undermining the unity they protect. But others survived intact, or intact enough, and what they had learned about the warp, about chaos, about the true nature of the threats that the Imperium faced and that we had so arrogantly dismissed as superstition, this knowledge transformed our understanding of everything. We were not immune. Our minimal psychic presence protected us from the warp's most direct predations, but it did not make us invisible, did not make us irrelevant, did not exempt us from the attention of beings who saw all life as potential resource. We had been fortunate, had expanded in a region of space where the warp's influence was relatively weak, had never encountered the full force of what lurked in that other dimension. that fortune would not last forever. That protection would not hold against determined assault. And the entities that had noticed us during the fourth sphere's transit would not forget, would not lose interest, would continue to watch and wait and seek opportunities to claim what they had been denied. This is the shadow that hangs over the Tau Empire now. This is the truth that our fifth sphere expansion must acknowledge, that our philosophy must incorporate, that our strategy must address. We are not merely building an empire in a hostile galaxy. We are building an empire in a galaxy where the hostility extends beyond the material, where threats exist that cannot be fought with weapons or negotiated with words, where the very fabric of reality is contested by forces that make the Imperium of Man look almost benevolent by comparison. The greater good endures. Our commitment to cooperation, to unity, to the principle that rational beings achieve more together than apart. This has not changed, cannot change, remains the foundation of everything we are. But our understanding of what the greater good requires, of what sacrifices it demands, of what costs it imposes, this has deepened, has darkened, has become something more complex than the simple philosophy our ancestors embraced in the aftermath of the Monto. Let me tell you of the present. Let me speak of what we face now, and what we must become to survive it. The galaxy is dying. I do not speak in metaphor. Approximately 100 years ago, by our reckoning, the Imperium of Man suffered a catastrophe so profound that its effects have reshaped the conditions of existence for every species, every civilization, every being that draws breath in this realm of stars and darkness. The Great Rift, the Cicatrix Maledictum, as humans name it, tore across the galaxy from end to end, a wound in reality itself that bleeds the stuff of the warp into real space, that has divided the Imperium in two, that has made travel and communication across vast swathes of space nearly impossible. We did not cause this. We did not anticipate it. We barely understand it, even now. Even after a century of study and observation, and desperate attempts to comprehend what has happened and what it means for our future. The Great Rift is not a phenomenon our science was designed to address, not a threat our philosophy was developed to counter, not an enemy our firecast can engage with pulse rifles and battlesuits. It is simply reality becoming unstable. It is the dimension we had dismissed as superstition, asserting itself in ways that cannot be ignored. It is proof that the universe we thought we understood was only a fraction of the truth, that forces exist beyond our comprehension, that the Tau Empire, for all our achievements, all our progress, all our certainty in the greater good, is a small thing in a cosmos far vaster and far more hostile than we had ever imagined. The Great Rift has affected us less than it has affected others. Our position in the eastern fringe places us distant from the worst of its depredations, and our minimal connection to the warp means that the storms which tear at human worlds pass over us with less violence. We have experienced disruption, have lost contact with some colonies, have seen increased activity from entities that our science still struggles to categorize. But we have not suffered as the Imperium has suffered, have not seen our civilization torn in half, have not lost entire sectors to the madness that the Rift has unleashed. This has created opportunity. As the Imperium reels, as its attention is divided between threats that multiply faster than its forces can respond, we have expanded. The fifth sphere expansion, launched in the aftermath of the fourth sphere's revelations, has pushed our borders further than ever before, has claimed worlds that the Imperium can no longer defend, has offered sanctuary to human populations abandoned by masters who have forgotten they exist. I have overseen portions of this expansion personally. I have stood on worlds that had known only imperial rule for millennia, and offered their populations a choice: continue waiting for salvation that will never come, or join a civilization that is present, that is functioning, that can provide the protection and prosperity that their former masters no longer deliver. Many have accepted, more than the Imperium would like to admit, more than their propaganda acknowledges, more than even our most optimistic projections anticipated. But expansion in crisis is different from expansion in stability. The worlds we claim now are damaged worlds, traumatized worlds, populations that have experienced horrors that our earlier converts never knew. They have seen the warp manifest, have witnessed demons walk among them, have learned through direct experience the truths that the Imperium's ecclesiarchy tried to hide behind ritual and superstition. They come to us not with the optimism of those choosing a better future, but with the desperation of those fleeing a present too terrible to endure, and some of them bring the taint with them. This is the challenge the fifth sphere has forced us to confront, the question that our philosophy did not anticipate, the problem that has no clean solution. The warp's influence is not merely external. It takes root in minds, in souls, in the spaces where consciousness meets something larger than itself. Humans who have been exposed to chaos, who have witnessed its manifestations, who have survived where others fell. They carry marks that our technology cannot always detect, seeds that may lie dormant for years before blooming into corruption that threatens everything around them. The Imperium's solution is brutality. They execute the tainted without hesitation, burn worlds, rather than risk contamination, treat entire populations as acceptable losses in the war against corruption. We rejected this approach. It violated everything the greater good represents, every principle of cooperation and shared sacrifice that defines us. We believed we could do better, could find ways to integrate the damaged without being damaged ourselves, could extend our civilization's benefits to those most in need without compromising the civilization itself. We were partially right. Our methods of screening and integration have prevented many incidents that the imperial approach would have missed through sheer indiscriminate destruction. We have saved lives that would otherwise have been lost, redeemed souls that would otherwise have been condemned, proven that compassion and caution can coexist. But we have also failed. There have been outbreaks, incidents where the taint we did not detect manifested in ways that cost lives, that required responses we would rather not have made, that forced us to act in ways indistinguishable from the brutality we had rejected. I have ordered purges. I have commanded the sterilization of facilities where corruption had taken root. I have signed authorizations for the termination of beings who came to us seeking sanctuary and instead became threats that could not be tolerated. These decisions haunt me. They should haunt me. Any being capable of ordering death should carry the weight of that ordering, should feel the cost of choices that end lives, should never become comfortable with the exercise of power over existence itself. The greater good requires sacrifice, but it also requires that we recognize sacrifice as sacrifice, that we do not pretend the costs we impose are anything other than costs. I tell you this because honesty demands it, because the truth of what we are cannot be separated from the truth of what we have done, because anyone who would join us deserves to know that the Tau Empire is not the utopia our propaganda sometimes suggests. We are better than the alternatives. I believe this still, will believe it until my last breath. But better is not the same as good, and the gap between what we aspire to and what we achieve grows wider with each passing year. The fourth sphere survivors presented another challenge, one that struck at the heart of our identity in ways that external threats could not. Those who returned from their transit through that other dimension. They were changed in ways beyond the obvious, beyond the taint that some carried, beyond the trauma that all bore. They had experienced something in that space between spaces, had encountered what they believed to be salvation, had been offered bargains by entities that appeared benevolent until they revealed their true nature, and they had learned to hate the auxiliary species that serve within our empire, the Kroot, the Vespid, the humans who have joined us, the dozens of others who have found a place within the greater good, the fourth sphere. Survivors returned viewing them not as partners, but as parasites. They believed, with a conviction that no argument could shake, that the entity that had reached for them in the warp had been drawn by the psychic presence of these other species, that the Tau alone would have passed unnoticed, that our integration of aliens had created the vulnerability that had led to their suffering. This belief was wrong. Our analysis, our study, our careful examination of everything the survivors could tell us, it all indicated that the entity's interest was not limited to psychic species, that the Tau themselves had been noticed and desired, that our minimal warp presence delayed, but did not prevent the attention of things that hunger for all souls, not merely those that shine brightest. But the belief persisted. The survivors could not be convinced, could not accept evidence that contradicted what they had experienced, what they had felt, what they knew with the certainty of those who had suffered and needed someone to blame. They became a faction, a movement, a source of division within an empire that had been built on unity, that could not function if its component parts turned against each other. We contained them. This is the word I will use, contained, because it is accurate without being complete, because it describes what we did without requiring me to detail methods that I am not proud of, that the greater good demanded, but that the being I was, before I became what I am, would not have recognized as consistent with our principles. The survivors of the fourth sphere now serve in specific capacities, in roles that utilize their skills while limiting their contact with the auxiliary species they have come to despise. They are watched, guided, corrected when their ideology threatens the unity that our empire requires. They are not punished. Punishment would only deepen their conviction, would only prove to them that the empire they remember has been corrupted beyond redemption. They are simply managed, directed, ensured that their contribution to the greater good continues, despite their inability to accept what that greater good actually encompasses. I do not know if this is right. I do not know if containing dissent is meaningfully different from suppressing it, if guiding damaged minds is meaningfully different from controlling them, if the unity we maintain through these methods is genuine unity or merely its appearance. These questions trouble me in the hours when duty does not demand my attention, when the weight of 3 centuries presses upon me, when I wonder whether the Tau Empire I serve is still the Tau Empire I believed in when my service began. The ethereal caste exists to provide unity. This is our function, our purpose, the role we play in the greater structure of Tau civilization. We guide the other castes, mediate between them, ensure that the conflicts which nearly destroyed our species during the Monto never resurface to threaten what we have built. We are necessary. Without us, history suggests, the Tau would fragment, would return to the tribal warfare that preceded unification, would lose everything we have gained. But necessity does not equal virtue. The power we wield, the influence we exert, the control we exercise, these are not good things in themselves. They are tools, means to ends that we believe are good, methods that we justify through outcomes rather than principles. We tell the other castes what to do, and they do it, not because they have evaluated our guidance and found it sound, but because our nature compels their obedience. Because whatever the ethereals possess that makes us ethereals also makes others follow us in ways they do not fully choose. I have wondered, across 3 centuries, whether this is tyranny wearing a benevolent mask. I have asked myself whether the greater good we preach is genuinely good, or merely what we have decided is good, whether the unity we maintain is genuine cooperation or sophisticated coercion, whether the Tao Empire is the enlightened civilization we claim, or simply a more efficient form of control than the Imperium's brutality. I do not have answers. I have only the evidence of outcomes, an empire that functions, species that genuinely thrive within our borders, lives that are genuinely better than they would be under any alternative arrangement. I have the testimony of those who have joined us willingly, who express satisfaction that seems genuine, who contribute to the greater good with enthusiasm that does not appear coerced. I have the comparison with alternatives that are unambiguously worse, that offer nothing but suffering, that make our imperfect civilization look like paradise by contrast. This is what I hold to. This is the foundation that sustains me when doubt presses close. We are not perfect. We may not even be good in any absolute sense, but we are better, and in a galaxy where better is the most anyone can hope for, being better matters. The 5th sphere continues. Our borders expand. Species join us. Worlds fall to us. The greater good extends its reach across a volume of space that grows larger with each passing year. We face threats from every direction. The Imperium that hates us, the Tyranids that would consume us, the Orcs that would destroy us, the forces of chaos that would corrupt us. We lose warriors and worlds, and sometimes hope, and we continue anyway, because continuing is what civilizations do, because the alternative to struggle is extinction, because the greater good requires not that we succeed, but that we try. Let me tell you, finally, what I believe this all means. Let me speak of the future we hope for, the purpose that drives us, the reason why the Tao Empire matters in a galaxy that seems designed to ensure that nothing matters at all. 6,000 years is nothing. I have said this already, but it bears repeating, because understanding our youth is essential to understanding what we represent. The Eldari ruled this galaxy for 60 million years before their empire fell. Humanity has been a spacefaring civilization for more than 30,000 years, an interstellar empire for more than 10,000. The Necrons slumbered in their tombs for 60 million years, their civilization ancient before most species achieved sentience. The Orcs have been fighting since before recorded history began, their existence predating the rise of species that have themselves been forgotten for millennia. We are infants among these powers. Our entire history, the Monto, the unification, the 4 spheres of expansion, every triumph and tragedy I have recounted, all of it fits within a span that these elder races would consider a brief moment, a transitional period, an era too short to produce meaningful change. And yet we have changed. We have risen from savagery to starlight in the blink of a cosmic eye. We have built an empire while others maintained theirs or watched theirs crumble. We have proven that youth is not weakness, that new civilizations can achieve what old ones could not, that the patterns of history are not fixed, that alternatives exist to the endless cycles of war and stagnation that define existence for so many. This is what the Tao Empire means. Not our territory, which is small by galactic standards. Not our military, which cannot match the forces arrayed against us. Not our technology, which is impressive but not unique, which others could replicate if they dedicated themselves to progress rather than tradition. What we mean is the demonstration that another way is possible, that rational beings can cooperate rather than compete, that diverse species can coexist within shared structures, that the greater good is not merely philosophy but practice, not merely ideal but implementation. The Imperium of Man calls us naive. Their propagandists mock our belief in cooperation, our inclusion of xenos species, our refusal to embrace the hatred that they consider essential to survival. They point to our setbacks, our failures, the moments when our principles have collided with realities that do not respect principles. They predict our destruction, confident that the galaxy will eventually teach us the lessons it has taught every other civilization that dared to hope for something better. Perhaps they are right. Perhaps our youth is merely inexperience, our idealism merely ignorance, our success merely luck that will eventually run out. Perhaps the galaxy will break us as it has broken so many others, will force us to become what we have resisted becoming, will prove that the greater good is a fantasy that cannot survive contact with genuine darkness. But perhaps they are wrong. Perhaps our youth is also adaptability, the capacity to change that older civilizations have lost. Perhaps our idealism is also clarity, the ability to see alternatives that those trapped in ancient patterns cannot perceive. Perhaps our success is not luck, but evidence that our methods work, that cooperation genuinely produces better outcomes than competition, that the greater good is not fantasy, but the simple recognition of truths that others refuse to accept. I do not know which interpretation is correct. 300 years of service, 300 years of study, 300 years of grappling with questions that have no easy answers, and I still do not know whether the Tau Empire will endure for another 6,000 years or fall within my remaining lifetime. The future is not written. The outcome is not determined. We might triumph, or we might perish, or we might become something so different from what we are that the question of continuity becomes meaningless. But I know this. We are trying. We are attempting something that no other civilization in this galaxy is attempting, something that the elder races abandoned or never conceived, something that matters regardless of whether it ultimately succeeds. We are proving that the choice exists, that beings confronted with the galaxy's cruelty do not have to respond with equal cruelty, that survival does not require the sacrifice of everything that makes survival worthwhile, that there are paths between annihilation and brutality that others have simply refused to walk. The humans who join us understand this. I have spoken with many of them across my centuries of service. Refugees from imperial worlds, converts who chose the greater good over the emperor's tyranny, populations who had known nothing but suffering until our forces offered them an alternative. They do not join us because we are perfect, because our propaganda has deceived them, because they are too naive to recognize that we have flaws and limitations. They join us because they see in us what they cannot see anywhere else, the possibility of something better. This is what we offer the galaxy. Not perfection, we are not perfect, have never claimed perfection, would be lying if we suggested our civilization represented any kind of ultimate achievement. We offer possibility. We offer the demonstration that the patterns of cruelty and despair, which define existence under imperial rule, under chaos influence, under the shadow of extinction that looms over all mortal civilizations. These patterns are not inevitable. They are choices, and choices can be changed. The greater good will outlast the Tau Empire. This is my deepest belief, the conviction that sustains me when doubt presses close, the hope that makes continued service meaningful even when the weight of 3 centuries threatens to crush me. Even if we fall, even if our enemies destroy us, even if every sept burns and every Tau dies, and our civilization becomes nothing but a footnote in histories written by those who conquered us. The idea will survive. The demonstration will persist. The proof that another way was possible will remain, will inspire others, will plant seeds that may bloom millennia after we are forgotten. The Imperium built an empire on faith and fear, on the worship of a corpse and the terror of what waits beyond the walls. That empire is crumbling now, fracturing under pressures it was never designed to withstand, failing the billions who depend upon it because its foundations were never stable, because faith and fear are insufficient bases for civilization, because what is built on suffering will eventually be consumed by the suffering it creates. We built an empire on reason and cooperation, on the recognition that individual beings achieve more together than apart, on the practical application of principles that serve the genuine interests of all who accept them. Our empire may crumble too. Nothing lasts forever. Nothing is immune to the entropy that claims all things. But if it crumbles, it will crumble differently. It will leave behind something other than suffering and wreckage. It will prove that the attempt was worth making, that the costs were worth bearing, that beings who tried to build something better existed and struggled and achieved things that mattered. I am old now. 300 years is a long life for our species, and I feel the weight of those years in ways that younger ethereals do not yet understand. I have made decisions that I question, have ordered actions that I regret, have compromised principles that I once believed inviolable. I am not the idealist I was when my service began, not the confident young ethereal who believed that the greater good answered all questions and resolved all conflicts. But I am still here. I still serve. I still believe, despite everything, that what we are building matters, that the Tau Empire represents something worth preserving, that the greater good is more than propaganda, more than control, more than the sophisticated tyranny that my darkest moments suggest it might be. I believe because the alternative is despair, and despair serves nothing. I believe because the evidence, imperfect though it is, suggests that we genuinely produce better outcomes than the alternatives. I believe because the beings who join us, who choose us, who contribute to our civilization with apparent willingness, they are not all deceived, not all coerced, not all victims of manipulation too subtle to perceive. Some of them genuinely find in us what they sought, genuinely achieve within our borders what they could not achieve elsewhere, genuinely live better lives because the Tau Empire exists. This is enough. It has to be enough. In a galaxy where nothing is certain, where every achievement is temporary, where every civilization eventually falls, meaning cannot depend on permanence. It must depend on the attempt, on the quality of what we build rather than the duration, on the genuine benefits we provide to those who live within our borders rather than the ultimate fate of the borders themselves. We are the Tau. We are young and we may not grow old. We are hopeful and our hopes may be shattered. We are committed to principles that the galaxy seems designed to disprove, devoted to a vision that may be nothing more than beautiful illusion. But we are also real. Our empire exists. Our citizens thrive, or many of them do. Our methods work, or many of them do. Our philosophy produces outcomes that justify belief, or enough of them to sustain belief through the moments when outcomes suggest otherwise. The greater good is not a destination. It is a direction, a way of moving through a universe that offers no fixed points, no permanent achievements, no certainty of any kind. We move toward it without ever reaching it, strive for it without ever achieving it, define ourselves by the striving rather than the success. This is what I have learned across 300 years of service. This is the wisdom that the Tau Empire has taught me. that I now offer to those who would understand what we are and why we matter. We matter because we try. We matter because we prove that trying is possible. We matter because in a galaxy of despair, we represent hope, imperfect hope, incomplete hope, hope that may ultimately prove unfounded, but hope nonetheless. And hope in this galaxy is the rarest resource of all. I am Ano Shiores. I have served the greater good for 312 years. I have witnessed our empire's triumphs and its failures, its achievements and its compromises, its moments of glory and its moments of shame. And I remain committed, despite everything, because of everything, in full awareness of everything. I remain committed to the path we walk, to the vision we pursue, to the future we may never reach but must never stop reaching for. The greater good endures. The greater good expands. The greater good offers itself to all who would accept it, demands only that they contribute what they can, promises only that their contribution will matter, that they will be part of something larger than themselves, that their existence will have meaning in a universe that offers meaning to nothing that does not create it. This is our gift to the galaxy. This is our challenge to those who believe that cruelty is inevitable, that suffering is permanent, that nothing can ever change. Come and see what we have built. Come and judge whether it is worth building further. Come and join us if you dare to hope. The greater good awaits.